The SCOTUS ruling that we got late on Monday, being described as a monumental victory for parental rights. So this was the case Mirabelli v. Bonta. And the court ruled that California laws that force teachers to lie to parents, really, to violate their parental rights, that's a no-no, because those parental rights are upheld by both the First and 14th Amendments to the United States Constitution. Now, in Washington state, as I mentioned, some parental rights groups are not really optimistic that this ruling is going to change anything for our state's 295 school districts. And we here in Washington have those same protections in place for student privacy, such that parents are not informed if their child is socially transitioning. And if you're not familiar with really what all that means, so say Bobby goes to school and goes to his teacher that day and says, I don't want you to call me Bobby anymore. I want you to call me Betty. And I want you to use she, her pronouns when you refer to me. And I want you to tell my classmates that that's my new identity here at school. But I don't want you to tell my parents. Bobby may also be going to a counselor at school and saying, I'm really confused about my gender identity. I think I might be really a girl trapped in a boy's body. Can you find me some counselors to talk to? Can you maybe even take me outside of school to meet with some medical professionals who could talk to me about what's involved in potentially beginning the medical transition of gender? So that's the crux of the issue. And in California, as in here in Washington, up until this ruling, teachers are not allowed, if the student doesn't want their parents to know, teachers are not allowed to share that information with the parents. A lot of people have a big problem with this. And it was a 6-3 ruling that came from the United States Supreme Court on Monday, reversing a ruling that came out of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which had previously allowed California's policy to stand. So I did get some comments from David Spring with the Washington Parents Network. He's been leading this fight here in Washington, challenging OSPI's directive to school districts about boys being allowed into girls' spaces, into girls' sports, also the parental rights issues of notification. But he told me he's not really optimistic at all that anything is going to change. And I want to show you here up on the screen part of what he posted in an article today. We do not believe that our governor and our state superintendent will issue such a statement or uphold their oath of office. Instead, we believe that both will continue to violate parental rights and continue to violate the U.S. Constitution. And Mr. Spring put up a lengthy article, which I'm going to link in my article on this today as well, basically saying, based on how OSPI has operated, leading up till now with all of this, even though the, Trump administration issued an executive order, I think it might have been day one in office, basically saying no boys in girls' sports and no boys in girls' bathrooms. And OSPI responded to say, our state law supersedes, even though that isn't how many constitutional experts see that. I also spoke this morning with Jackson Maynard, executive director of the Citizen Action Defense Fund, and they filed a lawsuit late last year in Thurston County Superior Court, challenging House Bill 1296. You may recall that was passed last year's legislative session, where lawmakers basically reversed the parental rights initiative that they had adopted into law a year prior. So that lawsuit is still moving forward. And Maynard told me today he believes this ruling from the Supreme Court might really help their case.
I think it's important not just for freedom of speech and for religious rights, for the two teachers that were plaintiffs in that case that were challenging policies brought forward by the state of California that forced them as teachers to not disclose information to parents about their children that they felt like was in violation of their freedom of speech and their religious faith. But I think it's also really important for parental rights. We have some other policies here in Washington state that similarly require school districts not to disclose information to parents that about their own students and about their students' health. That's part of why we brought the challenge to House Bill 1296, which was the bill that was passed last year by the legislature that overturned and kind of revised the parental rights initiative that was passed the year before. And our challenge was essentially asserting that parental rights were affected by that legislation and the way that they amended it. So there's a lot from that decision that we'll be able to use potentially in the challenge here in Washington State.
This morning, I got a chance to virtually meet with Republican leadership during their weekly media availability. And this was my question. I asked about this case specifically and got this response from Republican Senator John Braun, who was the Senate's minority leader.
What I read characterized as the largest win for parents' rights in recent history, and I agree with that. I have said for several years as we've been debating this topic that if children are having, gender dysphoria or struggling with other things, that's the absolute wrong time, the worst time perhaps, to separate them from their parents. And I certainly recognize that there may be that may be a difficult time for parents, but parents are built for difficult times, and certainly that's better than not have your family support, even if there's disagreement. And we already have rules in place, have for many decades, that address actual abusive situations, and that's a different situation. But the idea that we wouldn't tell parents about these very significant things going on in their children's lives, I think is very harmful to children, to parents, to the trust between school districts and parents and children, and it hurts the whole situation. So I think this is an important step. It's a big win for parents, and I think it will lead to better outcomes long term.
So he didn't specifically answer. I did ask, do you think this is going to make any change here? He didn't really get into that at all. But Washington State GOP Chair Jim Walsh told me this morning he believes it should absolutely change things here immediately because Washington, he says, must respect the nation's high court. Here's part of my conversation with Representative Jim Walsh.
The U.S. Supreme Court said the parents can't be shut out or kept in the dark about what's going on with their kids at school. And as we've got in California, as we've got up here in Washington, as we've got in some states, there's this move afoot to what they call socially transition gender confused children. And so that at school, a boy can pass as a girl or try to, and this is hidden from the parents or the custodial guardians, family members of the kid. This is very, very bad stuff. It is bad ethically, it's bad legally, it's bad morally. And the U.S. Supreme Court's ruling has, of course, emphasized the legal part. It is illegal for school employees to secretly really administer any kind of health care or mental health care to a child and not tell the parents. The flashpoint is this matter of gender confused kids and what's going on, but really the ruling applies to any health care or mental health care that a minor child would receive at school and the school not tell the parents about it. So it's a win for parents, it's a win for families. I believe it's a win for kids.
So as I mentioned when we opened, I did reach out to the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction and Superintendent Chris Rakedahl for comments. Shortly before we're recording this podcast, I got a response back from someone in the office that said they are preparing an official response to my request for comment on the SCOTUS ruling. So though I don't have that to share with you right now, it will be included in my article publishing later in the day on Tuesday up at the Center Square, Washington's site.